And welcome back to Spinny Explains IT. Hopefully this time I can actually look at the camera. The problem is I have the video right here on the screen, so I always like to look at myself because I'm a narcissist, and my alarm's going off, which is fun too. And I never really look at the actual camera, so it looks funky when I look at the videos. So I'm going to try to do that today, okay? So to start off today, I'm actually going to talk about a worm that happened back in 2005. And what I mean by worm is a virus. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a virus that replicates itself on each device, and it just keeps going and going and affects thousands, millions of computers if it goes undetected. They're more complicated than that, but that's just kind of the gist of it. So in about 2005, there was something called Sammy's worm. So what is Sammy's worm? Sammy, so back in 2005, we go back, those years, and MySpace was huge. Everybody had a MySpace. It was the thing, right? Facebook wasn't that big yet. MySpace was kind of the top dog. And so with MySpace, they allowed you to actually customize your own page to do whatever you wanted. So it literally gave you HTML code and you could do whatever you wanted. So a guy by the name of Sammy Kamkar, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, discovered that he could actually manipulate the code on the page with the HTML code they provided. So he was able to add more photos. He was able to change his relationship status to something specific that they didn't have on the option of the drop down. So when he saw this, he realized there was really no security at all. He could do whatever he wanted. So he scripted up a little script. If you don't know what a script is basically a program that runs and it does a bunch of commands. And so he had ran the script, and when he ran the script, basically it would go undetected. It was a silent script, and anyone who had visited his page would then request him as a friend, and then he also made it so whoever was the visitor of that page would then, on their web page, if anyone had visited the visitor's web page, then they would ask to be Sammy's friend. Hence the worm, and it just kept spreading. Well, the problem with worms is they can spread exponentially, right? It's not a 1-1, it's a 1, 2, 4, 8, going bigger and bigger and bigger exponentially. So pretty quickly, he was getting hundreds and then thousands of friend requests, up into the point where he got 1 million friend requests. And people were freaking out, like, hey, because what was happening is add him as a friend, and they would put him as a hero, which was kind of the top, like your best friends. And people started messaging saying, hey, I'm reporting you as hacking. You can't do this. You've hacked my account. And he was kind of like, yeah, whatever. Well, it got so big when he realized it started taking off, he kind of freaked out. He had emailed MySpace and said, hey, I think there's a worm going on. He did it anonymously, of course. And I think you should check it out. I think you could stop it with this. Gave him the code to finish it. But no one ever got back to him. Well, pretty soon, after he got his 1 million followers, MySpace had gotten enough reports that they took the site offline. And when it came back online, their way of how they fixed everything is they just deleted his account, which stopped the worm from, because they could never find, if you had the worm, it couldn't go to the place because it didn't exist, which was a good, fix the problem in the time being. So this is really good for cyber, though. At the time, you didn't really have security professionals. I mean, MySpace didn't even have a cyber team, didn't have a security team at all to do anything. So they were panicking. They had no idea what to do. And so it kind of solidified that you needed cyber professionals, and you needed them on your company for things like this. There hadn't really been big attacks or anything, or it wasn't really taken that seriously because the internet was still relatively new. And so when this happened, it really made, for cyber professionals, it was perfect and kind of paved the way for what we have today. And they were lucky, and MySpace is really lucky that it was just a guy just doing a goof, doing a little prank. Because if this was a hacker or someone who was malicious, they could have done some real damage. They could have hacked accounts, got names, it could have been real bad. And so what happened to Sammy was actually they ended up with 3 years probation with no computer access. So they couldn't touch the computer at all unless they used a specific computer that was basically kind of restricted and allowed them to have no internet access. So basically Word documents, Excel, whatever, but you could not access the internet with it. At the time they were starting up, they had a startup going on. So I would imagine that's pretty hard to run a startup for your company if you don't have any access to the internet. But yeah, so that was a really huge thing that came off of everything. And it kind of has been one of the first worms that were, it was, some even classified it as the most devastating computer virus. Even some say today, but I mean, the implications were huge, and it was important in the terms of cybersecurity. But with that, I wanted to talk about a little something. Speaking of social media, so I'm going to keep on this line. Let's talk about Facebook. And I'm sure you've seen this when you've been on Facebook. You've probably seen your grandma, your aunt, your mom, your dad, whoever. And there's just these fun little quick little questions you can answer, like, what's your spouse's name? Or what was your first pet? Or what was your childhood home? What street did you grow up, right? And people are like, oh, this is so fun. People get to learn about me. And they respond in the post onto their Facebook. Well, what people were doing, and this is really smart, is this is how they were capturing security questions, right? You think it's a fun question, like, where did you grow up? Or what city were you born? You're like, oh, that's fun. I'm going to put where I was born. Well, you've now just given information to any attacker who can now look at your profile, find your name, and find if you've been answering these, and then go to any place and look at the security questions. And if you were smart and you were kind of doing some reconnaissance, you would definitely go to someone's account and then try to get them to click on it to answer one of these questions that are exactly for the account you're trying to get into. And if you do that, you can infiltrate and take over a whole account. But it's funny because it's something I never even thought about. I'd see them all the time on Facebook, but genuinely it's a very smart way to do it. So don't answer those questions. You may think, oh, it's fun. Yeah, but the implications are very dangerous. If you're answering every security question that you have for any website and you're not realizing it, you are giving attackers a lot of ammunition to attack. And the next thing I want to talk about is encryption. So what is encryption? You hear about it in movies. Oh, I can't access this drive. It's encrypted. I have no idea what to do. And you have to we have to, decrypt it to find the information. So what is it? Well, simply what it is I have my private sensitive data that I don't want anyone else to see. And I have it there, and basically I encrypt it, make it essentially gibberish. I'm going to explain this very simply. You make it all gibberish, random numbers that people don't understand. So if someone gets that information, there's nothing they can do with it because they don't have the correct code or the correct key to decipher what's actually being shown. And this is important. I mean, this is an idea that has existed for thousands of years. I mean, you can go back to the Caesar cipher, which basically would do a shift of the alphabet. A is now D, and shift all the letters accordingly and send the message, and then they would receive the message, and they would have to know what the shift is to decipher it, right? Now, that's something that people could easily decode. I mean, especially nowadays, it would not be hard. You would just find, okay, I'm seeing that these are all probably E's because E is a very common letter. These are all vowels. These are common vowels that you speak in the language, right? And kind of the idea still exists of the Caesar cipher, right? Where you still need to know what the key is, right? You need to know what letter has been shifted, and so you can shift your cipher accordingly. But it's a lot more complex. I mean, there's basically kind of the Diffie-Hellman, and encryption is very simple, is you have a private key and a public key, and you use those together in order to decipher codes from one person, and the other person can do the same. It's kind of complicated, so I'm not going to really go into it on this video because I've realized after trying to explain it without having an actual representation, it's very hard. So if you really want to know how the Diffie-Hellman works, and it kind of gives you a great idea of how all encryption will work going forward, just head over to YouTube. You can look up from Art of the Problem. It's called Public Key Cryptography, Diffie-Hellman Key Exchange. And it gives a very simple way of how it works with colors and kind of a way for you to see visually how this is actually working. But it's very awesome and very cool. It's good to get started with that because if you know how that works, you can kind of build off and understand more encryption of how it's working and how people aren't able to just steal the codes. That is all I have for this week. Tune in next week. We'll talk about some other stuff. But yeah, for the most part, that's it. Have a wonderful day.